The old texts insist that before a seed can break the surface, it must first endure the absolute crushing weight of the soil in total, suffocating darkness. It does not manifest its way to the sun. It transmutes the pressure of the earth into the strength of its stalk. Observation from the ancients. He who seeks the light by standing in the sun is blinded. He who seeks the light by sitting in the shadow of the mountain finds the stars. To enter this archive is to take the vow of the occulted. You must understand that your power is a finite reservoir. Every time you explain your vision to a skeptic, every time you post your progress for the applause of strangers, and every time you seek accountability from those who do not share your hunger, you are poking holes in your own hole. You are sinking before you have even left the harbor. The Grandmaster knows that silence is the womb of sovereignty. The first meditation, the death of the witness. In this opening rite, you must mentally discard the audience. Imagine every person whose opinion you have ever feared or craved. See them as ghosts drifting away into the mist. They are no longer permitted to watch your reconstruction. The ancients observed that true transformation only occurs when no one is looking. When you work in the dark, you are not performing. You are becoming. The sensation, the coldness of mountain air filling your lungs, stripping away the warmth of vanity. The action, take the energy you usually spend on proving yourself and push it downward, deep into your roots. Feel it solidify into a heavy, golden core. Visualize a massive, rusted iron gate rising slowly from the center of a black, mirrored lake. It does not creak. It moves with a terrifying, silent weight. Beyond this gate lies the archive of your potential. You do not walk through it to become the gate, immovable, silent, and closed to the unworthy. Chapter 1. The Law of the Sealed Lip. The old texts insist that the soul has a skin, and every time we speak our intentions, we prick that skin with a needle. It was observed by the ancients that the common man is a creature of open vents. He feels a surge of inspiration, a spark of the divine fire. His first instinct is to share it. He runs to his kin, his peers, or the marketplace, and he exhales his vision into the cold air. In that moment of speaking, he feels a deceptive warmth. He receives the social credit for a victory he hasn't yet won. He tastes the honey of praise for a harvest that hasn't even been planted. But the manuscript is clear. The praise of the world is a predatory tax on the soul's momentum. When you announce a goal, your brain, in its primal simplicity, cannot distinguish between the declaration of the act and the completion of the act. By speaking, you release the dopamine meant to fuel the labor. You have spent the coin before you reached the shop. The Grandmaster looks upon this display with a chilling detachment, knowing that a spoken plan is a ghost, but a hidden plan is a titan. The alchemical pressure of the secret. To the initiate, a secret is not a burden. It is a battery. Imagine a steam engine. If the boiler is full of holes, the steam hisses out into the atmosphere, warming nothing but the empty air. The engine stays still. But if the boiler is sealed, bolted shut with iron rivets, and reinforced with the will of the silent, the pressure builds. It becomes volatile. It becomes dangerous. Only when that pressure is absolute can it be channeled into the pistons of action to move 1,000 tons of steel. The law of the sealed lip demands that you become the sealed boiler. When you have a vision for your wealth, your health, or your sovereignty, you must wrap it in a shroud of shadow. You must feel it burning inside you. When the urge to tell someone arises, that itchy, desperate need for external validation, you must recognize it as a weakness. It is the pawn within you crying out for a master to pat its head. The ancients taught that, by refusing to speak, you force the energy to turn inward. It begins to ferment. It transmutes from a fleeting thought into a primal obsession. This internal heat is what separates the dreamer from the architect. The architect does not need you to believe in the cathedral. They are too busy laying the foundation in the dark. The parasitic witness. There is a darker side to the spoken word. The manuscript speaks of the envious eye, a force more physical than many dare to believe. When you reveal your trajectory to those who are stagnant, you inadvertently invite their gravity to pull you down. It was observed by the silent ones that most people do not want you to fail. They simply cannot afford for you to succeed. Your ascent is a mirror that reflects their own decay. When you speak your hidden abundance, you give them a target. You allow their skepticism, their practical advice, and their subtle discouragement to enter your sanctum. Even their support can be a poison. To be cheered on is to be observed, and to be observed is to be judged. The moment you are watched, your movements become stiff. You begin to perform for the witness rather than for the work itself. You lose your primal authenticity. The Grandmaster moves like a predator in high grass unseen, unheard, until the moment the neck is snapped. There is no announcement of the hunt. There is only the result, the practice, the shroud of velvet. The old texts provide a rigorous discipline for the initiate. For the next 40 suns, you are to speak of nothing that pertains to your internal growth. The rule of 3: if someone asks of your progress, give them 3 dry facts that lead nowhere. Be boring. Be unremarkable. Let them believe you are a pawn, drifting aimlessly in the current. The internal forge. Every time you feel the high of a new idea, visualize yourself physically swallowing that light. Feel it settle in your gut. Let it burn there. If it hurts, let it hurt. That pain is the sound of the false self dying of thirst. The weight of the coin. Carry a physical token, a heavy stone, or a piece of unpolished light in your pocket. Every time you touch it, remember the weight of your silence. It is the physical manifestation of the power you are refusing to leak, the sovereignty of the unknown. There is a terrifying freedom in being unknown. When no one knows what you are doing, no one knows what to attack. When no one knows your Grandmaster strategy, they cannot prepare a The invisible king-queen understands that true authority does not require a fanfare. The sun does not announce that it will rise. It simply renders the darkness obsolete by its presence. Your success should be an environmental fact, something that people wake up to find already established. Like a mountain that appeared overnight while they slept. By the time the world sees your gold, it should be so heavy, so solidified, and so massive that no amount of envy or talk can move it. You have moved the abundance from the realm of the ethereal speech to the realm of the eternal matter. The shadow work, facing the void of silence. Why do we fear the silence? The manuscript suggests that we speak because we are afraid of our own nothingness. We use words to fill the void, to prove we exist, to tether ourselves to the social hive. To master the sealed lip, you must confront the void of the self. You must be comfortable being nothing in the eyes of others. This is the alchemical death. You must allow your reputation to wither. You must allow your social self to starve. Only when you are dead to the opinions of the marketplace can you be born as a sovereign. The shadow of wealth is found in the ability to walk through a room of people who think you are a failure, while you carry a kingdom in your pocket. The ancients observed, the pawn speaks to be seen. The Grandmaster is silent because he has already seen everything he needs. Visual motif, the silver needle. As you move through your days, hold the image of the silver needle in your mind. See it stitching a thick, black velvet shroud around your heart and your mouth. This shroud is not a prison. It is a protection. It keeps the primal heat in and the freezing cold of the world out. Every word you don't say is a stitch in your armor. Every goal you keep is a brick in your fortress. Feel the weight of the velvet. Smell the metallic scent of the needle. The silence is not empty. It is heavy. It is pregnant with the abundance that is currently forming in the dark, away from the prying eyes of the uninitiated. The ink dries on the parchment, the words settling into the fiber like a vow. The chapter of the sealed lip is recorded. The air in the archive feels colder now, more pressurized. You are beginning to carry the weight. Chapter 2. The Void of Creation. The ancients observed the terrifying truth that the modern mind spends its entire life fleeing. All true power begins in the absence of things. In the old texts, it is written that the universe did not begin with a bang of light, but with a pre-existing silence so profound, it had the gravity of 1,000 suns. To the initiate, the void is not a lack of substance. It is the raw, uncarved marble from which sovereignty is hewn. While the pawn fears the empty room, the Grandmaster seeks it as a sanctuary. It was noted by the silent ones that the common soul is horrified by the vacuum. The modern man fills his ears with the buzzing of electronic gnats. his eyes with the flickering of digital ghosts, and his calendar with the frantic scribblings of social duty. He does this because he suspects that if the noise stopped, he would find nothing beneath his skin but hollow reeds. But the manuscript insists, the king is forged in the hollow. The alchemy of solitude. The law of the void dictates that you cannot manifest a new reality while your current space is occupied by the debris of your old life. Abundance is a guest of high standing. It will not enter a house crowded with beggars, distractions, and the lingering sense of small talk. The shadow side of wealth requires the initiate to deliberately create a sacrificial emptying. The ancients used the metaphor of the drained lake. When the water of common activity is drained away, one finally sees the treasures, the monsters lying in the mud of the floor. You must become comfortable with the great boredom. You must sit in the silence of your own company until the itch to do something or check something passes. When that itch dies, something miraculous happens. The void begins to pull. Just as physical nature abhors a vacuum, the metaphysical realm rushes to fill a significant absence. If you create a void in your social life, deeper and more powerful alliances will eventually gravitate toward you. If you create a void in your consumption, original ideas will begin to bubble up from your own primal depths. If you create a void in your speech, the world will begin to lean in to hear what you are not saying. The occulted space. It was observed by the ancients that the most potent works of alchemy were performed in the chamber of the unseen. This was not merely a physical room, but a mental state of absolute unreachability. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must establish your own occulted space. This is a period of time or a physical location where the world cannot find you. No tether of technology can reach you. No voice can summon you. In this void, you are dead to the world. In this state of temporary death, you are free from the vibrational friction of other people's expectations. When you are alone, you do not have a face. You do not have a name. You do not have a status. You are simply a will operating in the dark. This is where the sovereign shift occurs. You stop reacting to the chess pieces moved by others and begin to rearrange the board from a place of total stillness. The manuscript warns, he who cannot sit alone in a dark room for 3 days without a book or a flame will forever be a slave to those who provide him with noise. The law of non-consumption. The void is maintained through a fast of the senses. The ancients insisted that to be a creator, one must cease to be a consumer. Every image you swallow, every opinion you overhear, every melody that isn't your own, these are foreign occupiers in your mental territory. They take up psychic real estate that belongs to your future abundance. The shadow work here involves a brutal auditing of your inputs. You must ask, is this noise paying rent, or is it a squatter in the palace of my mind? The Grandmaster treats their attention as the most primal currency in existence. They do not spend it. They invest it or they hoard it. By hoarding your attention in the void, you build an internal reservoir of creative potency. When you finally emerge from the void to act, your action has the force of a dam breaking, while the pawn nibbles at life with 1,000 small distractions. The Grandmaster strikes once with the weight of a mountain, transmuting loneliness into sovereignty. The greatest obstacle to the void is the fear of the shadow. When the noise stops, your internal demons, your insecurities, your past failures, your hidden envies will begin to speak. The silent ones did not run from these voices. They invited them to the table. This is the alchemical transmutation of the shadow. You must take the coldness of your loneliness and use it to temper your resolve. You must take the darkness of your fears and use it to sharpen your intuition. The void is where you meet your primal self, the part of you that existed before the world told you who to be. When you find that primal self, you realize that you do not need the world's permission to be wealthy or powerful. You recognize that abundance is an internal frequency that you broadcast, and the material world is merely the echo that returns to you. The Grandmaster does not chase gold. They become so gravitationally heavy through their internal work in the void that the gold has no choice but to fall toward them. The practice, the hour of the stone. The manuscript outlines a ritual known as the hour of the stone to be practiced by the initiate. The physical void. Find a space of absolute darkness. Sit on the floor, spine straight, for 60 minutes. Do not move, do not pray, do not manifest, simply exist in the nothing. The mental seal. Visualize a black sphere in the center of your chest. With every breath, see the sphere expanding, swallowing the room, the city, the world, until only you and the void remain. The sovereign command in this silence. State one and only one sovereign intent in your mind. Do not speak it. Just feel the weight of it in the empty space. By doing this, you are inscribing your will onto the fabric of the unseen. Because there is no noise to distort the message. The universe receives it as an absolute command. The sovereignty of the unseen king. The world perceives the void as a lack. They see your withdrawal as a failure. They see your silence as emptiness. Let them. This is your greatest advantage. While they are distracted by their own clamor, you are building your invisible empire. You are like the roots of a great oak tree, which grow deeper and wider in the dark silence of the earth than the branches ever will in the sky. The ancients observed, the pawn's kingdom is made of sand and shouting. The Grandmaster's kingdom is made of stone and silence. When you emerge from the void, you do not come to participate in the world. You come to oversee it. You come with a sovereign gravity that others can feel but cannot explain. They will wonder where your power comes from, but because they fear the void, they will never look for it there. Visual motif. The white quartz throne. As you navigate the noise of your daily life, keep the image of the empty stone throne in a cavern of white quartz. The air in this cavern is perfectly still. There is no sound but the slow, rhythmic dripping of water. This throne is your center. No matter how much chaos surrounds you, a part of you must always be sitting on that throne, in that silence, in that void. When people speak to you, answer from the throne. When you make a decision, make it from the throne. Feel the cold, unyielding quartz beneath your hands. This is the seat of the unseen. From here, you do not try to win. You simply observe your victory as an inevitable fact of nature. The void is not where you go to hide. It is where you go to reign. The ink on the page is dark and heavy, the letters appearing to sink into the parchment as if seeking the very void they describe. The chapter of the void is sealed. The candle is burning low, but the internal light, the cold fire of the sovereign is beginning to take hold. Chapter 3. Transmuting the venom of envy. The old texts insist that as you begin to rise, you will create a disruption in the ether. Your silence will be seen as arrogance. Your discipline will be seen as a judgment. And your budding abundance will be seen as a theft from those who refused to do the work. It was observed by the silent ones that the world produces a natural toxin called envy. In the realm of the pawn, envy is a destructive force that rots the container. But in the hands of the Grandmaster, envy is the most concentrated form of primal fuel available in the material plane. The manuscript calls this the alchemy of the viper, the nature of the attack. The ancients warned that envy is rarely delivered as an open blade. It is delivered as the dampener. It arrives as the subtle scoff from a friend, the realistic concern of a parent, or the unspoken resentment of a colleague. This is the venom. Its purpose is to induce social inflammation, to make you feel so uncomfortable in your growth that you voluntarily shrink back to a size that no longer threatens the mediocre. The shadow side of wealth reveals that if no one is envious of you, you are likely still a pawn. Envy is the sovereign's compass. It points directly toward your most potent assets. If the world is trying to dampen a specific part of your life, that is precisely where your greatest hoard of gold is buried. The transmutation of the heat. The Grandmaster does not seek to be liked. The Grandmaster seeks to be effective. When you feel the venom of another's envy, the common impulse is to defend yourself or to hide your light. Both are failures of sovereignty. To defend yourself is to grant the envious person equal status. To hide is to let them win. Instead, the old texts suggest a process of internal combustion. Imagine the envy of others as a physical heat. Rather than letting it burn your skin, you pull it through your pores and direct it into your internal forge. You take their resentment and use it to harden your resolve. You say to the void, they are providing the fire. I am providing the steel. It was observed by the ancients that the more people hate a man for his silent rise, The faster he rises, provided he never speaks to defend himself. Their focused attention, even when negative, is a form of energetic tribute. They are spending their life force thinking about you, while you are spending your life force building your empire. You are the value sink for their wasted energy. The mirror of the shadow. A deeper mystery lies within this chapter, the envy you feel toward others. The manuscript insists that you cannot reach silent abundance if you are leaking power through your own jealousy. In the shadow work, envy is redefined as displaced recognition. If you see someone with a wealth that bites at your spirit, it is because your soul recognizes that same capacity within yourself, but you have not yet had the courage to claim it. The Grandmaster uses their own envy as a scouting party. When you feel that sharp, bitter sting at another's success, you do not turn away. You lean into the pain. You ask, what specific frequency of their power am I currently denying in myself? By identifying the target of your envy, you identify your next sovereign objective. You transmute the bitterness into a refining fire, purging the cowardice that kept you from pursuing that same height. The social camouflage, while you are transmuting the venom internally. The ancients observed that one must remain externally opaque. The manuscript speaks of the law of the common coat. Even as you become a titan in the dark, you must not wear your golden breastplate in the presence of the envious. To do so is to invite unnecessary friction before your power is absolute. The Grandmaster acts as a mirror. When you interact with those prone to envy, reflect their own world back to them. Talk of the weather, talk of the trivial, or most effectively mention a small, inconsequential struggle you are facing. This feeds the envious heart a false victory, making them feel safe in their stagnation. While they are gloating over your tattered cloak, you are quietly moving the heavy stones of your monument into place. They are watching the cloak, you are watching the kingdom. The practice, the obsidian breath, to master the venom of the world. The initiate is commanded to perform the obsidian breath when in the presence of hostility. The intake, as you feel the heat of someone's judgment or envy, inhale deeply. Visualize their negativity as a thick, black smoke entering your lungs. The compression, hold the breath. In the silence of your mind, see that smoke being compressed into a tiny, brilliant diamond in the center of your furnace. The release, exhale, a cold, clear mist. You have stripped the heat, the energy from their attack, and left them with nothing but the ash of their own words. By doing this, you become alchemically preeminent. You are no longer a victim of the social environment. You are the refinery that turns the world's waste into sovereign fuel. The sovereignty over negativity. The ancients observed that once a Grandmaster has fully integrated this law, they no longer feel offended. Offense is a luxury of the pawn. The Grandmaster sees an insult as a free energy transfer. The more the world tries to pull you down, the more tension is created in the bowstring of your life. If you remain silent and centered in the void, that tension eventually snaps you forward with a velocity that the pleasant man can never achieve. The shadow side of wealth is understanding that you need your enemies. You need the coldness of the world to make your internal heat meaningful. Without the venom of the viper, the antidote of your sovereignty would have nothing to prove its strength against. The manuscript concludes this section with a haunting observation. The pawn dies by the sting. The Grandmaster drinks the poison and finds it tastes of iron and immortality. Visual motif, the black viper. As you move through the world this week, visualize a black viper shedding its skin. See the old, dull, venom-stained scales falling away to reveal a body of iridescent obsidian. The viper does not apologize for its fangs, nor does it seek the approval of the birds in the trees. It is grounded, silent, and carries its heat within. When the world strikes at you with envy, see yourself as the obsidian viper. Let the strike hit the glass-hard surface of your new skin and slide off, leaving you unmarked and even more polished than before. The venom is not your enemy, it is your instruction. The ink is still warm, and the air in the archive has grown heavy with the scent of ozone. You have learned to harvest the fire of others. You are becoming a dangerous thing, a creature that cannot be discouraged, because even discouragement is now food for your ascent. The candle is half spent, but the scrolls ahead are darker still. Chapter 4. The alchemical weight of secrecy. The old texts insist that every secret held by the initiate has a measurable, metaphysical mass. It was observed by the silent ones that the common man is light as dry husks in the wind, because he has no internal density. He is transparent. To look at him is to see through him, for he has nothing hidden, nothing banked, and nothing shielded from the prying eyes of the collective. But the Grandmaster is opaque. The law of alchemical weight dictates that sovereignty is a product of mass. In the physical world, the largest bodies have the strongest gravitational pull. In the world of the unseen abundance, your gravity is determined by the volume of power you contained without releasing. The manuscript calls this the hoard of the hidden king, the currency of the dark. In the realm of the pawn, wealth is a performance. It is a new garment, a loud carriage, or a boastful tally of coins. But the ancients observed that this is evaporative wealth. By showing it, they thin it. By proving it, they dilute it. The shadow side of wealth introduces the concept of occulted assets. True abundance begins with the secret sum, a reservoir of resource, be it gold, knowledge, or influence, that no other living soul knows exists. The moment a second person knows of your hoard, its alchemical weight is halved. If the world knows of it, its weight becomes zero. It becomes a mere social fact, subject to the friction of public opinion and the erosion of common entropy. When you carry a secret of great value, perhaps a maneuver in the market you have already executed, a manuscript you have completed in the dark, or a significant sum of silver buried beneath the floorboards of your mind, you begin to walk differently. You develop a heavy step. This is not a physical heaviness, but a vibrational density. Because you know something the world does not, you are no longer a subject of the world's reality. You are the author of a hidden reality. This internal knowledge creates a center of gravity that naturally pulls more opportunities, more resources, and more power toward you, simply because you are the heaviest object in the room. The leaking vessel versus the pressurized tank. The manuscript uses the imagery of the diving bell to descend into the deeps of true abundance. One must be able to withstand immense pressure without cracking. The pawn is a leaking vessel. Every time he experiences a win, he must vent the pressure by telling someone. He seeks the high of the witness. In doing so, he remains buoyant. He floats on the surface of life, tossed about by every wave and fashion. He can never reach the sunken gold on the ocean floor because he lacks the weight to sink. The Grandmaster, however, seeks to be a pressurized tank. When you achieve a victory, you must bolt it down. You must swallow the success and let it sit in your gut like a leaden weight. This is the alchemical weight of secrecy. By not speaking of your win, you force the universe to recognize it as a permanent fact rather than a passing story. The ancients insisted that a secret victory, held in total silence for a year and a day, undergoes a transmutation. It stops being an event and starts being a trait. You no longer have success. You are success. Your very presence becomes an omen of abundance. The gravity of the no. A crucial part of this weight is the power of the unexplained refusal. The pawn explains himself when he says no to an invitation or a distraction. He provides a litany of excuses, seeking the other person's understanding. He is trying to remain light and acceptable. The Grandmaster says no and offers no shadow of a reason. This creates a void of information. It forces the other person to wonder what you are doing, what you are building, and why their world is not important enough to warrant your time. This not knowing on their part creates a mental hook in their psyche. They begin to revolve around your silence. You have effectively made yourself the sun in their system, and they have become the planets caught in your gravitational well. Your secrecy is the lead in your keel. It keeps you upright when the storms of social chaos blow. The more you know that they do not, the more unsinkable you become. The practice, the lead token, the forgotten witness. Perspective provides a discipline for the initiate to build this internal mass. The silent win, achieve something small but significant, a financial goal, a physical feat, or a disciplined habit. Tell no one, not your spouse, not your friend, not your God. The waiting. For 7 days, carry the memory of this win as if it were a physical stone in your chest. When you are tempted to share it, imagine that speaking will cause you to float away into the sky. Lost and untethered. The sinking. Feel yourself sinking into a deeper layer of reality. Notice how, as you keep the secret, you become less reactive to the noise of others. Their opinions feel light and inconsequential because they are playing with paper, while you are holding lead. The sovereign shift, from transparency to stone. The world fears the opaque. They will call you cold, mysterious, or distant. Understand that these are merely the complaints of the buoyant. They are the cries of those who are being tossed by the wind, looking at the rock that remains unmoved. The shadow side of wealth is the realization that you cannot be commonly loved and sovereignly wealthy at the same time. Love, in the common sense, requires transparency. Sovereignty requires density. By holding your secrets, you are building a psychic fortress. Within those walls, the alchemical power of the unseen can work its magic. It is here, in the dark, under the weight of your silence, that the lead of your effort is slowly, agonizingly, turned into the gold of your reality. The manuscript concludes, the pawn's life is an open book that no one reads. The Grandmaster's life is a sealed tomb that everyone wonders about, and it is the tomb that contains the treasure. Visual motif, the leaden chest. As you go through your week, hold the image of a heavy leaden chest sinking slowly into deep, dark water. See the bubbles escaping from the lid as it descends. Every time you keep a secret, every time you refuse to explain yourself, and every time you hide a victory, imagine yourself placing a golden coin into that chest. Feel the chest getting heavier. Feel it pulling you down, away from the surface-level chatter of the world, into the deep abundance, where the pressure is great, but the gold is pure. You are not hiding, you are gaining mass. The ink has dried, looking like scorched earth on the page. The archive feels smaller now, as if the walls themselves have moved in to listen. You are no longer light. You are starting to carry the gravity of the invisible king. The candle flickers. Warning of the coming dark. Chapter 5. The Invisible Sovereign. The old texts insist that a crown is not a piece of jewelry. It is a vibrational frequency. It was observed by the silent ones that the world is a mirror that reflects your internal assessment of yourself. But it does so with a time delay. The pawn waits for the world to grant him status before he acts with authority. The Grandmaster understands that authority is a preemptive strike. The manuscript calls this the law of the unseen coronation. The paradox of the tattered cloak. The ancients observed that the most dangerous kings are those who do not wear their royalty on their sleeves. In the common marketplace, men scream their importance. They wear status markers. They cannot afford to impress people they do not like. They are pretenders, those who reach for the fruit of sovereignty without ever planting the root. The shadow side of wealth requires the initiate to adopt the cloak of the commoner. To be an invisible sovereign means to carry the absolute internal certainty of your empire, while your external appearance remains unremarkable. The manuscript speaks of the primal satisfaction of being the wealthiest, most powerful person in a room while being treated as the least significant. When you do not need the world to acknowledge your status, you have achieved total autonomy. The moment you seek recognition, you give the world power over you. If they can give you status, they can take it away. But if your status is occulted, hidden within the void of your own soul, is untouchable, you move through the world with a secret smile, knowing that while the pawns are arguing over crumbs, you are quietly moving the entire table. The sovereignty of presence. It was observed by the ancients that presence is the byproduct of a unified will. Most people are fragmented. Their thoughts are in the past, their fears are in the future, and their attention is scattered among a dozen digital distractions. They have no center. The Grandmaster, through the work of the void and the sealed lip, has condensed their being into a single, sharp point of reality. When an invisible sovereign enters a room, the atmosphere shifts. There is no need for a loud voice or grand gestures. There is simply a weight, a sovereign gravity, that forces others to unconsciously adjust their behavior. The ancients called this the rex absconditus, the hidden king, because you have built internal mass through your secrets and your silence. You occupy more psychic space than those around you. You do not try to lead. People simply find themselves following your rhythm. You do not ask for respect. The vacuum of your silence demands it. Acting with prior authority. The manuscript details a chilling technique, the assumption of the end. The pawn asks for permission to succeed. He looks to the authorities, the banks, the bosses, the social gatekeepers, and waits for a sign that he is allowed to be great. The Grandmaster knows that the gatekeepers are themselves pawns, guarding doors that have no locks. The invisible sovereign acts from the future. If you intend to be a master of industry, you do not wait for the title to act with the decisiveness of a master. You do not wait for the bank balance to have the calmness of a millionaire. You adopt the internal posture of the destination immediately. This is not faking it until you make it. That is a pawn's cliché. This is transmutation. By holding the sovereign frequency in the present, you collapse the distance between now and then. The material world, which is slow and dense, eventually has no choice but to rearrange itself to match your internal fact. The ancients observed, the world does not give the king his kingdom. The king's presence makes the land a kingdom. The shadow work, killing the approval seeker. To become the invisible sovereign, you must perform a ritual execution of the part of you that wants to be liked. The manuscript insists that niceness is often a form of cowardice, a social lubricant used by those who are afraid of the friction of their own power. The sovereign is not cruel, but they are uncompromising. They are kind from a position of strength, not nice from a position of need. You must become comfortable with being the villain in someone else's story. If your ascent requires you to walk away from toxic environments, to say no to the demands of the mediocre, or to remain silent when others demand an explanation, you must do so without a tremor of guilt. The invisible king answers only to the hidden law. The opinions of the marketplace of souls are merely noise. When you stop seeking approval, you gain universal leverage. People are drawn to those who cannot be manipulated by praise or blame. Your unreachability becomes your most attractive quality. The practice, the sovereign walk. The manuscript outlines a physical and mental discipline for the initiate. The internal crown. Before entering any public space, visualize a heavy, cold circlet of iron being placed upon your head. Feel the weight of it pressing down, grounding your spine. The scanning eye moves through the world not by looking at people, but by looking through the theater of the pawn. See the strings of their anxieties, their needs, and their noise. Remain the forgotten witness. The delayed response, when spoken to, wait 3 seconds before responding. In that silence, you are reclaiming the tempo of the interaction. You are showing that your mind is a fortress that cannot be breached by the urgency of others. The alchemy of acting as if. The shadow side of wealth reveals that the most potent form of manifestation is acting with authority before the evidence is visible. It was observed by the silent ones that if you walk into a situation as if you already own the outcome, the world will treat you as the owner. Not because of confidence, but because of certainty. Confidence is a feeling unstable. Certainty is a state of being fixed. The invisible sovereign does not hope for a deal to close or a project to succeed. They move with the boredom of the successful. They treat their future victories as historical facts that haven't happened yet. This boredom is a terrifying power. It signals to the universe that you are not hungry, and the universe always feeds those who are already full. The manuscript concludes, the pawn plays the game to win. The Grandmaster plays the game because he has already won, and he is merely watching the pieces catch up to the reality of his victory. Visual motif. The tattered cloak, and the gold. As you move through your week, hold the image of yourself wearing a tattered, dust-covered cloak. Beneath that cloak, however, you are wearing a breastplate of polished, radiant gold. The world sees the dust, they see the rags. They treat you with the casual disrespect they show to all common things. Your task is to feel the cold, hard gold against your skin. Every time someone underestimates you, every time you are passed over, and every time you are ignored, feel the gold glow hotter. Smile to yourself. You are the invisible sovereign. You have the tactical advantage of being underestimated. You are not acting like a king. You are being the king while the world thinks you are a beggar. This is the ultimate shift. When you no longer need the world to see your gold, you finally have the power to spend it. The ink on the page has become a deep, metallic violet, shimmering under the dying light of the candle. The archive feels like a palace now stone and shadow transformed by the posturing of the soul. You are walking taller. The pawn is a memory. The sovereign is breathing. The archive is quiet, waiting for the primal hours. Chapter 6. The Architect of the Night. The old texts insist that the sun is the eye of the public, and under its gaze, all energy is performative. It was observed by the silent ones that the daylight belongs to the marketplace, to the haggling, the noise, and the social contracts that bind a man to his neighbors. But the night is the laboratory of the sovereign. The manuscript calls this the law of the primal hours. The ancients observed that between the hours of 2 and 5 in the morning, the psychic noise of humanity drops to its lowest decibel. The billions of competing wills, the frantic desires, and the petty jealousies of the masses are temporarily silenced by sleep. In this vibrational window, the atmosphere becomes thin, pliable, and incredibly conductive. The shadow side of wealth reveals that work done in these hours carries a triple weight. While the pawn sleeps to recover from a day of being commanded, the Grandmaster wakes to command the day before it begins. To be the architect of the night is to build your empire, while the inspectors are unconscious. It is the ultimate occulted advantage. The thinning of the veil. It was noted by the silent ones that the boundary between the material and the primal is not a wall, but a tide. At noon, the tide is out. The world is dense, stubborn, and resistant to change. But in the deep night, the tide rushes in. The alchemical power of the unseen is at its peak. When you sit at your desk or in your forge while the world is silent, you are not just working, you are inscribing, because there are no other wills awake to contradict you. Your intent moves through the ether like a blade through silk. If you are building a business, studying an esoteric craft, or moved by the sovereign shift to organize your future, the night grants you a clarity that the day can never provide. The ancients called this the Nox Divina, the divine night. In these hours, you are the only witness to your own creation. This reinforces the law of the sealed lip. By the time the sun rises and the first pawn opens his eyes, you have already moved the mountains of your life 3 inches to the left. The world wakes up to a new reality and assumes it was always there. They do not see the scars of the night on your hands. The discipline of the ghost. The manuscript speaks of a specific state of being called the ghost walk. To the architect of the night, sleep is not a right, but a strategic resource. The Grandmaster does not sleep because he is tired. He sleeps to reset the vessel. He wakes before the dawn, not out of a sense of productivity, a pawn's term, but out of a sense of predation. He wakes because he is the hunter, and the future is the prey that is easiest to catch while it is still dreaming. The old texts insist that by operating in the primal hours, you develop a shadow body. You become a ghost in the machinery of society. You interact with the world during the day, but your home is the silence of the 3 a.m. candle. This creates a profound internal sovereignty. You realize that you do not belong to the 9-5 cycle of the slave. You belong to the infinite cycle of the creator. The pawn fears the dark because he thinks monsters live there. The Grandmaster loves the dark because he is the monster. The alchemical forge of the solitary flame. There is a specific power in the single light source. The ancients observed that working by the light of one flame or one small lamp focuses the visual will into a laser. In the daylight, your eyes are distracted by 1,000 colors and movements. In the night, there is only the work and the void. This environmental restriction forces the transmutation of effort. Because you cannot see the distractions, they cease to exist. You enter a state of occulted flow, where time ceases to be a linear progression and becomes a pool of potential. The manuscript warns, beware the blue light of the digital ghost in these hours, for it is a tether back to the hive. The architect uses the night for deep thought, for the movement of heavy assets, and for the sharpening of the soul's edge knot, for the consumption of the masses' leavings. The practice, the midnight sentinel. The forgotten witness provides a ritual for those seeking to become architects. The severing, at the stroke of midnight. Perform a physical act of closing. Shut a door, lock a chest, or blow out a candle to signal that the world of man is now dead to you. The watch, Choose a block of 2 hours between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. In these hours, you are the sentinel of your own destiny. You are to perform your most high-value task, the one that requires the most sovereign will. The dawn observation. As the first light breaks, stand by a window and watch the pawns begin to stir. Do not feel pity. Feel distance. You have already won the day. Their urgency is now your entertainment. The sovereignty of the first strike. The shadow side of wealth is understanding that life is a tempo game. He who moves first defines the field. By working in the night, you are always one move ahead. When the marketplace opens, you are not starting, you are finishing. When the boss gives an order, you have already anticipated the need and handled it 3 hours ago. This creates an aura of effortless mastery to the world. It looks like you have good luck or natural talent. They do not see the hourglass of stars. They do not see the cold hours where you wrestled with the primal forces while they were dreaming of sheep. The Grandmaster knows that the gold found in the night is of a higher purity than the gold found in the day. It is moon metal harder, colder, and more permanent. The manuscript concludes, "The sun is for the harvest, but the night is for the planting. He who only works in the light will find his bins empty when the winter of the soul arrives." Visual motif. The hourglass of stars. As you move through the noisy hours of your day, hold the image of an hourglass sitting on a black velvet cloth. Instead of sand, it is filled with powdered stars, brilliant, cold, and luminous. See the stars falling slowly, one by one, through the narrow neck. Every time you carve out a primal hour in the night, imagine yourself catching those falling stars and forging them into a solid bar of silver. This silver is your sovereign reserve. It is the hidden abundance that gives you the power to remain calm when the pawns are panicking. You are the architect. The night is your blueprint. The silence is your hammer. The ink on the parchment is nearly frozen, the letters standing in sharp relief like mountain ridges. The archive is reaching its deepest point of the night. The world feels like a distant, flickering memory. You have claimed the hours. You have claimed the dark. Chapter 7. The Shadow of the Harvest. The old texts insist that abundance is not a process of accumulation, but a process of ruthless subtraction. It was observed by the Silent Ones that the pawn is a collector of dead weight. He carries the friendships of his youth that no longer nourish him. He clings to habits that once comforted him, but now cage him. He hoards the opinions of people he doesn't even respect. He is a tree choked by its own unpruned suckers, wondering why his fruit is bitter and small. The manuscript calls this the law of the scythe. In the shadow side of wealth, the harvest is not a celebration of what has grown. It is a ceremony of what must be cut away so the sun can reach the core. The Grandmaster understands that, to move into a higher frequency of sovereignty, certain parts of the current identity must be sacrificed to the void. The pruning of the social vine. The ancients observed that most human connections are not alliances, but anchors. In the realm of the pawn, loyalty is often a code word for shared stagnation. You are expected to remain the version of yourself that makes your peers feel comfortable. If you begin to rise, if you adopt the sealed lip or the sovereign posture, the vine of your old social circle will tighten its grip. The shadow of the harvest requires you to look at your associations with the eyes of the grave. Ask of every person in your inner circle, if I were to die today and be reborn as a king, would this person have a seat at my table, or would they be a ghost haunting my hall? The manuscript insists that you cannot carry the energy of the pawn into the kingdom of the Grandmaster. You must be willing to let certain relationships wither. You do not need to break them with loud arguments. You simply stop watering them. You withdraw your attention, your primal currency, and let the natural law of entropy take its course. The Grandmaster does not fear being alone on the peak. He fears being crowded at the bottom. The execution of the lesser self. A deeper mystery within the old texts is the internal culling. It was observed by the Silent Ones that within every initiate there is a lesser self that thrives on the very things that destroy sovereignty. The need for pity, the addiction to small distractions, and the secret love of one's own failures. This lesser self is a parasite. It feeds on the leaking power we discussed in the first chapters. To harvest your true potential, you must become the executioner of your own comfort. The manuscript speaks of the sacred betrayal. The moment you decide to no longer honor the promises you made to your lower nature, you betray your laziness. You betray your desire for common approval. You betray the version of you that everyone else expects to see. The ancients taught that the Grandmaster is the phoenix that rises only because it was brave enough to strike the match. If you are not willing to burn the pawn you currently are, the sovereign you wish to be will remain a prisoner of your own flesh. The gravity of the pomegranate. The manuscript uses a symbol of the pomegranate to explain the density of the harvest. Under its hard, leathery skin lie hundreds of seeds, each a potential kingdom. But to get to the seeds, the skin must be broken. To plant the seeds, the fruit must be destroyed. In the shadow side of wealth, your current successes are often the greatest obstacles to your future sovereignty. The pawn reaches a certain level of comforter, steady wage, a modest reputation, a predictable life, and he stops. He clings to the fruit, afraid that if he breaks the skin, he will lose everything. He does not realize that the fruit is meant to be consumed so the seeds can be freed. The Grandmaster is always ready to level the field. When a project, a business, or a lifestyle has served its alchemical purpose, he does not cling to it out of sentimentality. He harvests to lead the experience and capital and abandons the husk. He is a nomad of power, moving from one harvest to the next, never allowing his roots to become so tangled in one place that he cannot move when the great deep calls. The practice, the night of the scythe. The forgotten witness provides a ritual of detachment for the initiate, the audit of shadows, in the primal hours. 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Take a piece of parchment. List 3 things, 1 person, 1 habit, and 1 self-belief that belong to your pawn identity. The severing intent. Visualize a heavy, rusted scythe. See yourself physically cutting the tethers between you and these 3 things. Feel the sudden lightness in your chest. The silence of the grave. For the next 7 days, do not speak of these things. Do not explain your withdrawal to the people involved. Do not apologize to yourself for the change. Let the dead bury the dead. The sovereignty of the void. When you cut away the dead wood, you create a gap to the pawn. This gap feels like loss. He feels empty, lonely, or anxious. He rushes to fill the hole with new distractions. The Grandmaster sits in the gap. He knows that the void of creation requires this emptiness. By clearing the social and internal debris, you are making room for the alchemical weight of your true abundance to settle. The shadow of the harvest is the understanding that you must be empty before you can be substantial. The ancients observed, the field that is never cleared becomes a jungle of weeds. The field that is scorched by the harvest becomes the cradle of the grain of gold. Visual motif. The rusted scythe and the pomegranate as you navigate the marketplace this week. Hold the image of a massive, rusted scythe leaning against a pomegranate tree in full bloom. The scythe is not an enemy. It is a tool of love for the future. Every time you have to say no to a distraction, or every time you feel the sting of a fading friendship, visualize the scythe catching the light. Hear the swish of the blade through the grass. See the pomegranate fruit falling and splitting open on the dark earth, spilling its crimson seeds. You are not losing, you are releasing. You are not being diminished, you are being refined. The weight you feel leaving your shoulders is the gravity of the pawn being traded for the sovereignty of the Grandmaster. The ink on the page is dark and tacky, smelling of iron and ancient soil. The archive feels different, no cleaner, sharper, as if the very air has been pruned of its excess. You have learned to kill what no longer serves the unseen. The pawn is bleeding out. The sovereign is beginning to take his first heavy breaths. Chapter 8. The Equilibrium of the Great Deep. The old texts insist that the greatest threat to an initiate's rise is not failure, but the inability to contain success. It was observed by the Silent Ones that the pawn is a creature of surface tides. When a small wave of fortune hits him, he is tossed into a frenzy of excitement, leaking his power through celebration and boastfulness. When a wave of misfortune strikes, he is dragged into the undertow of despair, gasping for the air of external validation. The manuscript calls this the law of the anchor. In the shadow side of wealth, abundance is not a high vibrational flight. It is a gravitational sink. The ancients observed that true power does not flicker. It hums with the low, terrifying frequency of the deep ocean. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must develop an equilibrium so profound that neither the arrival of 1,000,000 gold pieces nor the loss of your reputation can cause a single ripple on the surface of your soul. The myth of the high. The manuscript warns against a modern obsession with positivity. The ancients insisted that giddiness is a leak. When you feel high because of a victory, you have moved your center of gravity from your internal void to an external event. You have become a slave to the wind. The shadow of the deep requires you to meet every victory with a cold reception. When the gold finally arrives, when the sealed lip produces its first physical harvest, the Grandmaster does not smile. He does not call his kin. He does not treat himself to the baubles of the marketplace. Instead, he goes into his void of creation and sits with the success until it becomes heavy. He forces the excitement to transmute into acceptance. By refusing to be lifted by success, you remain grounded in your power. You signal to the unseen that this abundance is not a surprise or a gift, but a natural consequence of your sovereignty. The universe does not give more to the man who screams with joy at a crumb. It gives more to the man who receives a loaf as if it were his birthright. The buoyancy of disaster. Conversely, it was noted by the silent ones that the Grandmaster is unsinkable because he is already at the bottom. When the world attempts to strike you, when a market collapses, a traitor reveals himself, or the venom of envy becomes a physical obstacle, the initiate does not struggle. Struggle is the hallmark of the buoyant. The pawn thrashes in the water, exhausting his life force to stay at the surface where everyone can see his struggle. The Grandmaster adopts the equilibrium of the stone. He allows the weight of the event to pull him deeper into the silence. He knows that at the bottom of the great deep, the water is still. The pressure there is immense, but it is uniform. From this depth, he observes the surface kiss with the boredom of the eternal. He waits for the tide to turn, knowing that his internal mass is too great to be moved by the currents of the day. The manuscript insists, he who is moved by nothing, moves everything. The alchemical stillness, ataraxia. The ancients used the term ataraxia, the state of being untroubled. This is not the peace of the monk. It is the stillness of the predator. In the shadow side of wealth, you must practice emotional decompression. You must train your nervous system to remain flat in the face of extremes. The manuscript suggests that the initiate should deliberately put themselves in tensy environments, the marketplace of high stakes, the room of hostile witnesses, and practice the slow heartbeat. If your heart speeds up because of a number on a screen or a word from a mouth, you are still a pawn. You are still taggable by the world's hooks. To be a Grandmaster is to be unhookable. Your equilibrium is your armor. When the world sees that they can neither entice you with honey nor terrify you with vinegar, they stop trying to manipulate you. You become a static variable in their equations of force they must work around, rather than a piece they can move. The practice, the breath of the anchor. The forgotten witness provides a physical anchor for the soul when the surface tides begin to pull. The sight of the void, when a great event, good or bad, occurs. Visualize a massive, rusted anchor hanging in a starless, black void. The waiting, inhale, for a count of 8. Imagining the air is as heavy as liquid mercury. Feel it settling in your lower abdomen, turning your center into a weight of 10,000 pounds. The dead stop. Exhale slowly. As the air leaves your body, visualize all your reaction, the excitement or the fear leaving with it. What remains is the anchor. You are now at the bottom. You are still. You are sovereign, the sovereignty of the unmoved mover. There is a secret power in being the most bored person in the room during a crisis. The shadow side of wealth reveals that people are naturally drawn to stasis. In a world of frantic change, the person who does not move becomes the axis of the situation. By maintaining your equilibrium of the great deep, you force others to orbit you. Your silence in the face of good news makes others want to work harder to impress you. Your stillness in the face of bad news makes your enemies doubt their own strength. You have moved beyond the emotional economy of the masses. You are now operating in the currency of the absolute. The ancients observed, the pawn is a cork on the wave. The Grandmaster is the ocean floor. The wave may break itself upon the shore, but the floor remains the foundation of the world. Visual motif, the massive anchor in the void. As you move through your marketplace this week, hold the image of a massive iron anchor hanging in a starless, silent void. The anchor is not attached to a ship. It is not held by anything. It simply exists in its own weight. Every time you feel the itch to celebrate a win or the sting of a loss, see the anchor. Hear the low, metallic thrum of its stillness. Feel your own body becoming that anchor. You are not reacting to the world. You are the center of gravity that the world is reacting to. You are at the depths where the light of the sun the public eye cannot reach. You are in the great deep, where the only thing that exists is the alchemical weight of your own will. The ink on the page is cool and gray, the letters looking like stones settled into the silt of the parchment. The archive is silent now, silence that is not empty, but heavy. You have found your anchor. You have found your floor. The pawn thrashes. The Grandmaster sinks into his power. Chapter 9. The Occulted Network. The old texts insist that the marketplace of men is merely a colorful veil draped over a much colder, much quieter machinery. It was observed by the silent ones that the pawn networks by friction he rubs his identity against others, exchanging business cards like hollow tokens, seeking to be known, to be connected, and to be seen. He builds a web of glass that shatters the moment the wind of adversity blows. The manuscript calls this the law of the silver tether. In the shadow side of wealth, true influence is not public connection. It is occulted leverage. The Grandmaster does not network. He weaves. He understands that a single, secret thread tied to a high-value anchor is worth 10,000 loud acquaintances in the public square. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must stop seeking friends and begin placing tethers of influence in the dark. The myth of the public alliance. The ancients observed that any alliance known to the world is a target for the world's entropy. When two powerful men are seen shaking hands, the venom of envy immediately begins to corrode the bond. Skeptics analyze it, competitors plot against it, and the social tax of maintaining the appearance of the alliance drains its actual utility. The occulted network requires you to keep your most potent relationships invisible. The manuscript speaks of the shadow broker, the initiate who provides value to others in total secrecy. When you help a sovereign in another field without seeking credit, you create a primal debt. This debt has a far greater alchemical weight than a public favor. It sits in the other person's psyche as an unresolved tension. Because the world does not know they owe you, they cannot interfere with the repayment. The Grandmaster moves through life with a secret ledger of favors, knowing that at any moment he can pull a silver tether from across the world and see a mountain move in his favor, while the public wonders why the earth is shaking. The spider's stillness. The manuscript uses the imagery of the spider in the cellar. The spider does not run across the floor to meet the fly. It does not announce its presence. It sits in the darkest corner, perfectly still, feeling the vibrations of the entire room through the lines of intent it has spun. To weave an occulted network, you must become the vibrational center. Instead of reaching out, you create a vacuum of value. By mastering your craft in the void of creation, you become a point of gravity. When you eventually and quietly connect with another high-value individual, you do not talk of collaboration, a pawn's word. You speak of symmetry. You find the hidden needs of those above you and fill them without a sound. You become the ghost in their machine, the one who solves the problem that no one else even knew existed. This creates a tether of necessity. The Grandmaster is not loved. He is essential. The sovereignty of the small knot. The ancients insisted that a network of 3 kings is more powerful than a nation of 10,000 pawns. The shadow side of wealth requires the initiate to perform a brutal culling of the contact. You must look at your network and identify the noise. If a connection does not provide sovereign intelligence, primal resource, or occulted leverage, it is a leak. It is a thread that is draining your attention currency. The Grandmaster builds small knots, clandestine circles of 3 or 4 individuals who operate at the same vibrational density. These circles have no names, no meetings, and no public record. They are shared secrets. Within these knots, Information flows with a purity and speed that the public market can never replicate. Information is the blood of the empire, and in the occulted network, the blood is never thinned by the lies of the marketplace. The practice, the placement of the silver thread, the forgotten witness, provides a discipline for the initiate to begin weaving their web. The anonymous value, identify one sovereign in your field, or a related one. Perform a significant service for them, or provide them with high-value intelligence in a way that remains entirely anonymous or deeply private. Do not ask for anything. Do not sign your name with a flourish. The observation of the vibration. Feel the silver tether being established. Notice how your internal weight increases, because you now hold a secret power over a high-value node. The discipline of the ghost. For 30 suns, do not mention this act to anyone. If the person tries to thank you publicly, redirect the attention. Remain the invisible hand. The sovereignty of the hidden patron. There is a terrifying power in being the unknown variable in a situation. When you operate through the occulted network, you are never the one standing in the line of fire. You are the one who suggested the strategy to the person standing in the line of fire. You have the influence of a king with the invulnerability of a shadow. The shadow side of wealth is understanding that true power is indirect. The pawn wants to be the face of the company, the lead in the play, the name on the building. The Grandmaster wants to be the reason the face is smiling, the writer of the play, and the owner of the land the building sits on. By remaining occulted, you avoid the friction of the public eye. You can move your pieces across the board with total freedom, while the pawns are too busy watching the famous people to notice that the game has already been won. The ancients observed, the king is seen by all and moves with difficulty. The shadow is seen by none and moves with the wind. He who would rule the world must first learn to be the wind. Visual motif, the spider's web in the cellar. As you move through the clamor of the day this week, hold the image of a spider's web in a dark, forgotten cellar. See the dew on the threads glistening like frozen diamonds in a single, stray beam of light. The web is perfect. It is silent. It is waiting. Every time you make a secret connection, every time you provide anonymous value, and every time you tether yourself to a high-value node in silence, imagine yourself spinning a new thread of silver. Feel the web expanding. Feel the vibrations of the world coming to you through the threads. You do not need to hunt. You have built a system of capture. You are the still point at the center of a kingdom of tethers. The ink on the page has turned to a shimmering, metallic frost, the lines interconnected like a map of the stars. The archive feels vastly larger now, as if the walls have dissolved into a global web of shadow. You are no longer an isolated node. You are becoming the conductor of the invisible orchestra. The pawn is a lonely island. The Grandmaster is the bridge that no one sees. Chapter 10. Feeding the inner fire. The old texts insist that the greatest tragedy of the human condition is the wasted agony. It was observed by the silent ones that the pawn is a creature of external venting. When he feels the sting of rejection, the heat of anger, or the crushing weight of shame, he seeks to release it. He weeps to his peers. He shouts into the void of the marketplace, or he numbs the fire with the cooling waters of distraction and vice. In doing so, he remains comfortable, and he remains a slave. The manuscript calls this the law of the internal forge. In the shadow side of wealth, there is no such thing as negative emotion. There is only raw kinetic potential. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must stop seeking peace and start seeking pressure. You must learn to take the darkest impulses of your nature, and instead of venting them, shove them into the furnace beneath your ribs. The alchemy of irritation. The ancients observed that a pearl is nothing more than a localized response to a persistent irritation. Without the grain of sand cutting into the flesh of the oyster, there is no treasure. The inner fire requires a grain of sand. The Grandmaster does not seek a life of Zen-like calm. He seeks a life of managed turbulence. He identifies his deepest insecurities, the fear of being small, the resentment of those who overlooked him, the primal hunger for sovereignty, and he refuses to heal them. To heal is to extinguish the pilot light of your ambition. Instead, the initiate performs the sacred containment. When you are insulted, you do not retaliate. To retaliate is to spend the energy. Instead, you swallow the insult. You feel it burn. You tuck it away in a corner of your mind, labeled fuel. Every time your resolve wavers during the primal hours of the night, you open that cabinet and let the heat of that remembered insult drive your fingers back to the work. You are turning emotional waste into sovereign momentum. The three primal coals. The manuscript identifies three specific types of shadow energy that provide the highest caloric value for the inner fire. The coal of spite, the desire to prove the world wrong. While the law of attraction cliches tell you to work for love, the ancients observed that spite is a far more reliable fuel for the long winter. Spite does not tire. Spite does not need a vision board. Spite only needs a memory. The coal of lust for power, not the base hunger of the flesh, but the primal sovereignty, the deep biological need to be the one who decides. When you feel the itch of your own insignificance, feed it to the fire. Let it turn into a cold ambition, the coal of grief, the recognition of lost time. The Grandmaster looks at the years spent as a pawn and feels a holy rage. This rage is the bellows of the forge. It ensures the fire never settles into mere embers. The architecture of the furnace. It was noted by the Silent Ones that a fire without a furnace is merely a forest fire, destroys everything and builds nothing. The furnace is your discipline. The shadow side of wealth requires you to build a vessel of habit that can contain the heat. If you have the fire but no structure, you will burn out. You will become the tortured artist or the bankrupt visionary. The Grandmaster uses the law of the sealed lip as the outer wall of the furnace. By not speaking of his inner fire, he ensures the oxygen is regulated. He uses the void of creation as the chimney, directing the heat toward a single, sharp point of output. When you work, you are not working. You are channeling. You are taking the black smoke of your internal chaos and passing it through the filter of your will until it comes out the other side as pure value, as gold, as influence, as a completed empire. The world sees the gold. They never see the furnace that produced it. The practice, the breath of the bellows, the forgotten witness provides a ritual for the initiate to use when the world attempts to dampen their spirit. The internalization, when you encounter a negative event, a loss, an insult, a setback, do not change your expression. Maintain the equilibrium of the great deep, the drawing in as you breathe. Visualize the sting of the event being physically pulled into a glowing blue orb in your solar plexus. The combustion, mentally say the words, "This is fuel for the harvest." Feel the orb grow hotter. Use that heat to perform your most difficult task of the day with a terrifying intensity. The sovereignty of the high heat individual. There is a specific radiance to a person who is feeding an inner fire. The shadow side of wealth reveals that people are subconsciously terrified of and drawn to those who possess internal combustion. You will notice that when you stop venting and start burning, your presence becomes heavy. People will find it difficult to maintain eye contact. They will sense that there is a machine running inside you that they cannot understand and certainly cannot stop. The Grandmaster is a nuclear reactor. He does not need the sun, the approval of others, because he has a sun inside him. He is self-sustaining. The ancients observed, the pawn seeks warmth from the fires of others and freezes in the night. The Grandmaster carries the forge in his marrow and turns the winter into a spring. The danger, the meltdown. The manuscript warns that the inner fire must always be directed at an external objective. If you feed the fire but have no work to receive the heat, the furnace will begin to melt its own walls. This is the source of madness and self-destruction. You must always have a project of sovereignty, a business, a craft, a hoard that acts as the heat sink for your internal pressure. The shadow is a dangerous ally. It will give you the world, but it demands that you never stop moving. The moment the Grandmaster becomes idle, the fire begins to eat the master. Visual motif, the blue forge fire. As you move through the marketplace this week, hold the image of a forge fire burning a brilliant, haunting blue in the heart of a frozen mountain peak. The fire does not flicker in the wind. It is steady. It is pressurized. It is loud. Every time you feel offended, small, or impatience, see yourself throwing a shovelful of black coal into that blue flame. Hear the roar of the combustion. Feel the heat radiating through your limbs, turning your hands into tools of destiny. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are the engine of your own reality. The world is not happening to you. The world is the scrap metal you are melting down to forge your crown. The ink on the parchment is still steaming, the letters slightly charred at the edges. The archive is pulsing with a low, mechanical thrum. You have moved beyond stillness. You are now active. You are hot. The pawn has been consumed. The sovereign is the flame that remains. Chapter 11. The Silence of the Stone. The old texts insist that in the kingdom of the pawn, words are used to bridge the gap between two empty vessels. It was observed by the silent ones that the common man uses speech as a nervous discharge. He speaks to fill the void, to reassure himself of his own existence, and to explain his value to a world that isn't listening. He treats his voice like a handful of sand, throwing it at everyone he meets, hoping some of it will stick. The manuscript calls this the law of the omen. In the shadow side of wealth, a word is not a tool of description. It is a weapon of command. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must stop talking and start vibrating. You must adopt the silence of the stone, the ability to stand in the center of the marketplace, unmoved and unmoving, until the world is forced to define itself against you. The architecture of the unsaid. The ancients observed that the most powerful thing a man can say is nothing at all. When you refuse to speak, you create a psychic vacuum. The omen of presence. It was noted by the silent ones that there is a difference between being quiet and being silent. Quietness is the absence of noise. It is passive. Silence is a presence. It is active. The manuscript speaks of the monolith, a massive black stone standing in a desert. The stone says nothing. It does not argue with the wind. It does not explain its origins to the sand. It simply is. Because it is so singular, so dense, and so silent, it becomes a landmark. It becomes a thing that everything else is measured against. When you enter a room, do not announce your arrival with greetings and smiles. Enter as a fact. Let your internal mass, the weight of your inner fire, and your occulted network do the talking. People will feel the pressure of your silence. They will instinctively lower their voices. They will look to you for the permission to exist in that space. This is not arrogance. It is alchemical preeminence, the transmutation of prose into poetry. The manuscript insists that when the Grandmaster does speak, his words must be few and heavy. In the archive of the unseen, words are treated as physical assets. You do not spend them. You allocate them. Every sentence should be a sovereign decree. If you can say it in 3 words, do not use 4. If you can communicate it with a glance, do not use words at all. The ancients observed that the value of a voice is inversely proportional to its frequency. The man who speaks constantly is ignored even when he says something brilliant. The man who speaks once a month is heard even when he whispers. By practicing the silence of the stone, you ensure that when your lips finally part, the world stops moving to listen. Your speech becomes an event. The practice, the 3-second gate. The erasure. Mentally delete half of what you are going to say. Ask yourself, is this word a brick in my empire, or is it a leak in my hall? The eyelock, maintain a steady, unblinking gaze during the silence. Do not look away out of politeness. You are the stone. The stone does not blink. The sovereignty of the unexplained. There is a profound power in being misunderstood and remaining silent about it. The pawn is obsessed with being right. If someone misinterprets his motives, he will spend hours correcting the record. He is a slave to his reputation. The Grandmaster understands that a secret reputation is a sharp blade. If people think you are cold, dangerous, or inscrutable, let them. That shadow they have projected onto you is a shield. It prevents them from getting close enough to see your actual machinery. The silence of the stone means never defending yourself, never explaining your shift, and never justifying your abundance. Your results are your only explanation. The mountain does not explain why it is high. It simply provides the peak for those brave enough to climb it. The ancients observed. The pawn's truth is a shouting match that convinces no one. The Grandmaster's truth is a silence that reshapes the world. Visual motif, the monolith in the desert. As you navigate the marketplace this week, hold the image of a jet-black monolith standing alone in a vast, windswept desert. The sun beats down on it. The sand scours it. The wind howls against its edges. The monolith does not move. It does not change color. It does not answer the elements. It simply occupies the space with an absolute, terrifying certainty. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to gossip, or to fill an awkward silence, see yourself as the monolith. Feel the cold, hard surface of your new skin. Hear the silence of the desert within your own mind. You are not withholding. You are solidifying. You are turning your gaseous self-talk into mineral sovereignty being. The ink on the page is matte and heavy, looking like a crack in the parchment itself. The archive is so quiet that the sound of your own heartbeat feels like a drum in a cathedral. You have learned the language of the unseen. You are no longer a speaker. You are a presence. The pawn begs to be heard. The Grandmaster is the silence that follows the thunder. Chapter 12. The currency of the ancestors. The old texts insist that the pawn is an orphan of time. He believes his life began at his birth and ends at his grave. He views wealth as a frantic accumulation of paper and digital ghosts within a 70-year window. Because he is untethered from the deep stream, he is easily blown over by the winds of a single generation's crisis. He is a shallow-rooted weed, terrified of the frost. The manuscript calls this the law of the blood memory. In the shadow side of wealth, abundance is not something you create, it is something you reclaim. The Grandmaster understands that he is the current tip of an unbroken spear that stretches back into the obsidian dark of prehistory. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must stop operating as a solo agent and start spending the currency of the ancestors, the primal survival instincts, the accumulated resilience, and the genetic spite of those who survived plagues, wars, and famines so that you could breathe. The myth of the self-made man. The ancients observed that the self-made man is a lie told to keep the pawn isolated. When you believe you are alone, you are weak. When you believe your resources are limited to your own IQ and your own two hands, you are a slave to your own exhaustion. The currency of the ancestors requires you to tap into the shadow lineage. The manuscript speaks of the primal bank, the collective intelligence of your ancestors that sits dormant in your marrow. Every time an ancestor of yours chose to endure rather than surrender, they deposited a coin of will into your biological vault. The Grandmaster does not hope for strength. He reaches back into the dark and pulls it forward. He realizes that his hunger for sovereignty is not a personal whim, but a generational mandate. When you sit in the void of creation, you are not sitting alone. You are the board of directors for a 1,000-year-old corporation of survival. The alchemical river of Mercury. The manuscript uses the imagery of the river of Mercury. Mercury is heavy, elusive, and toxic to the weak, but to the alchemist, it is the first matter. This river flows through the petrified forest of your DNA. To spend this currency, you must perform the invocation of the primal. The pawn is civilized, which is to say, he is domesticated and declawed. He has been taught to suppress his darker instincts, the territorial drive, the predatory gaze, the uncompromising will to to dominate his environment. The Grandmaster recognizes these not as sins, but as high-value assets. By tapping into the blood memory, you reclaim the predatory calm of the hunter. You stop over-intellectualizing your moves. You start to smell opportunity and feel treachery in the air before it manifests. You are no longer using the new brain of the marketplace. You are using the old brain of the apex survivor. This is the sovereign instinct. It is faster than thought and heavier than logic. The transmutation of generational trauma. A deeper mystery within this chapter is the refining of the poison. The manuscript insists that the traumas of your lineage, the poverty of your grandfathers, the displacement of your mothers, the failures of your kanar, not burdens. They are pressurized fuel. The pawn uses his family history as an excuse for his current stagnation. He leaks his power by lamenting his lack of a head start. The Grandmaster takes that generational lack and turns it into a sovereign debt. He says to the void, "My ancestors were denied their crown. I will collect the interest on their suffering." This holy spite is the purest form of the inner fire. When you work, you are not just working for your own bank account. You are aventing the centuries of suppression felt by your bloodline. This gives your actions a weight that no competitor can match. You are not one man. You are an army of ghosts standing behind a single blade. The practice, the rite of the bloodstone, the forgotten witness provides a ritual for the initiate to bridge the gap between the present and the deep stream. The somatic recall. In the primal hours, sit in total darkness. Place your hands on your thighs and feel the pulse in your wrists. The visualization of the river. See a river of liquid mercury flowing from the base of your skull, down your spine, and into the earth. This river is the memory of the command of reclamation. Mentally recite, "I am the harvest of their survival. I claim the interest on their pain. I am the sovereign of the deep stream." Feel the cold heat of the mercury filling your limbs. The sovereignty of the ancient eye. There is a specific look in the eye of a person who has reclaimed their blood memory. The shadow side of wealth reveals that the world is terrified of the atavistic sovereign, the person who looks like a modern professional but carries the frequency of the Stone Age. When you operate from the deep stream, you are no longer distracted by the fashion of the day. You don't care about the latest economic trend or the social virtue of the month. You are looking for permanence. You are looking for territory. You are looking for legacy. The Grandmaster builds his abundance to last for centuries because he is thinking in ancestral time. While the pawn is trying to get rich by Friday, the Grandmaster is moving the heavy stones of a dynasty. This patience of the grave is a superpower. It allows you to outlast, outwait, and outmaneuver anyone who is merely playing for the now. The ancients observed, the pawn is a leaf in the wind of the present. The Grandmaster is the river that carved the canyon. One belongs to the season. The other belongs to the earth. Visual motif. The river of mercury in the petrified forest. As you navigate the marketplace this week, hold the image of a river of liquid mercury winding through a forest of petrified stone trees. The forest is silent. The trees are millions of years old. The mercury is heavy, shining with a dull, silver light, and it moves with an unstoppable, sluggish power. Every time you feel weak, overwhelmed, or uncertain, visualize the mercury rising up from the ground and entering the soles of your feet. Feel it turning your bones into mineral sovereignty. You are not a new thing. You are an old power that has finally woken up. You are the hidden abundance of your ancestors, finally finding a voice. The gold you seek is not out there. It is a sediment of the river that has been flowing through your blood since the first fire was struck in the dark. The ink on the parchment has turned to a heavy, dull silver, smelling of salt and old wars. The archive feels ancient nows. If we are sitting at the very center of the world's memory, you have found your deep stream. You are no longer alone. The pawn is a ghost of a single life. The Grandmaster is the living embodiment of an eternal line. Chapter 13. The Mask of the Fool. The old texts insist that the greatest danger to a growing power is its own visibility. It was observed by the Silent Ones that the pawn, upon gaining a small measure of success, immediately puts on his finest robes and stands in the center of the town square. He wants to be envied. He wants to be acknowledged. He wants to be significant. In doing so, He paints a target upon his own chest for every tax collector, every envious neighbor, and every predator in the marketplace. The manuscript calls this the law of the cracked mirror. In the shadow side of wealth, the Grandmaster understands that anonymity is the ultimate luxury. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must master the mask of the fool, the ability to appear harmless, unremarkable, or even slightly incompetent to the public eye, while your internal sovereign shift is operating at a level they cannot even perceive. The strategic value of nothing to see here. The ancients observed that the world only attacks what it fears, and it only fears what it understands to be a threat. The mask of the fool requires the initiate to deliberately lower the vibrational appearance of their life. While your bank account swells in the occulted network, and while your inner fire burns white hot, your external presentation should remain flat. The manuscript speaks of the inconspicuous merchant, the man who owns half the city but wears a coat with a loose button and drives a carriage that squeaks. Why? Because the pawn is looking for a king to overthrow. If you look like a king, you invite a revolution. If you look like a fool or a commoner, you are granted the freedom to move through the world without friction. You are a ghost in their calculations. When people underestimate you, they do not guard their secrets. They do not prepare their defenses. They do not compete with you. They leave the gates of their citadels wide open, because they do not believe a fool could ever pose a challenge. The alchemical shield of the mundane. The manuscript uses the imagery of the porcelain mask. One half is the face of a simpleton. The other half is a jagged crack, to where the mask is, to perform the rite of the ordinary. The pawn is addicted to impressing people. He wants to be the smartest person in the room. The Grandmaster, however, seeks to be the least noticed person in the room. He listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, he asks naive questions. He allows others to explain things to him that he already understands deeply. By playing the student or the uninformed, you force the other person into a state of ego expansion. They become arrogant. They become talkative. They leak their primal intelligence to you because they want to feel superior to the fool. The shadow side of wealth reveals that the most valuable information in the world is gathered by those whom the world deems unimportant. The janitor sees more than the CEO. The quiet assistant knows more than the board of directors. The Grandmaster is the sovereign who hides in the servant's uniform. The transmutation of disrespect. A deeper mystery within this chapter is the harvesting of the insult. The manuscript insists that when you wear the mask of the fool, people will eventually treat you with a lack of respect. They will talk over you, they will ignore your presence, and they will dismiss your potential. To the pawn, this is an injury to the ego. To the Grandmaster, this is a tactical victory. Every time someone underestimates you, they are giving you a free move on the chessboard. They are ceding territory to you because they don't think you are capable of holding it. You take that disrespect and you feed it to your inner fire. You do not retaliate. You do not show them who you are. That is a leak. Instead, you smile the secret smile of the sovereign. You wait, you build, you consolidate. By the time they realize you are a Grandmaster, you have already bought the board they are playing on. The practice, the cloak of the commoner. The forgotten witness provides a discipline for the initiate to master the art of the unremarkable. The ego death exercise. Deliberately enter a social situation where you have status and choose to say nothing that reinforces that status. If someone corrects you on a topic you master, thank them for the insight. The mundane anchor. Carry a small, cheap object, a common copper coin, or a piece of twine. When you feel the urge to brag or show your power, touch the object. Remind yourself, I am the shadow in the room. My power is silent. The observation of the predator. Watch how people change their behavior when they think no one significant is watching. This is their true frequency. Record it in your secret ledger. The sovereignty of the unseen hand. There is a profound freedom in being irrelevant to the masses. The shadow side of wealth reveals that the public king is a prisoner. He cannot go anywhere without a guard. He cannot say anything without a filter. He cannot change his mind without a scandal. He is a slave to his own image. The invisible sovereign has no image. He can change his mask at will. He can be a fool in one city and a sage in another. He can walk through the most dangerous parts of the marketplace because he looks like he has nothing worth taking. This is the ultimate sovereignty. It is the ability to exert total influence over your reality without ever having to defend your position. You are the ghost in the machine who actually runs the gears, while the official leaders are busy posing for the cameras. The ancients observed, the pawn wears his crown on his head and loses it in the wind. The Grandmaster wears his crown in his heart and hides it behind a laugh. One is a target, the other is a ghost. Visual motif, the cracked porcelain mask. As you navigate the clamor of the day this week, hold the image of a white porcelain theater mask. One side is smooth and smiling, the face of a harmless jester. The other side is cracked, revealing a glimpse of a dark, ancient, and terrifyingly intelligent eye beneath. The world only sees the porcelain. They see the jester. They see the commoner. Every time you choose to remain silent instead of winning an argument, every time you dress down to avoid notice, and every time you let someone educate you on your own specialty, imagine yourself adjusting the mask. Feel the cold porcelain against your skin. You are not lying. You are occulting. You are protecting the gold of your soul from the acid of public attention. You are the Grandmaster who is currently winning the game because the other players don't even know you're in the room. The ink on the page is shimmering and elusive, the letters almost disappearing if you look at them directly. The archive feels lighter now, filled with a strange, mischievous energy. You have learned to hide in plain sight. You have learned the power of the fool. The pawn wants to be the star of the play. The Grandmaster owns the theater and sits in the back row, wearing a disguise. Chapter 14. The Sovereign's Sacrifice. The old texts insist that every kingdom has a foundation of bones. It was observed by the silent ones that the pawn dreams of a success that is purely additive: more gold, more friends, more comfort, more applause. He believes that the Grandmaster is simply a pawn with a heavier purse. He does not understand that true sovereignty is not an acquisition. It is a holocaust of the common self. The manuscript calls this the law of the great severing. In the shadow side of wealth, the final barrier to absolute abundance is the path of the many. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, you must be willing to pay the sovereign's sacrifice, the deliberate and agonizing trade of belonging for authority. You must become comfortable with the reality that as you rise in mass and frequency, you will become mathematically incompatible with those you once called peers. The myth of the popular king. The ancients observed that a leader who is loved by all is usually a leader who has compromised his vision to the lowest common denominator. The sovereign's sacrifice requires you to kill the need to be understood. The pawn leaks his power by trying to explain his shift to those who are still sleeping. He wants his family to get it. He wants his old friends to cheer him on. He wants his progress to be validated by the very people he is trying to surpass. This is a form of energetic anchoring. By seeking their understanding, you give them the power to define your reality. The Grandmaster understands that the higher you go, the fewer people can breathe the air. If you are doing the work of the architect of the night, if you are feeding the inner fire, and if you are maintaining the silence of the stone, you will eventually become a foreign object to your old world. You will be called cold, obsessive, or changed. Accept this as a title of nobility. Their confusion is the proof of your ascent, the loneliness of the deep stream. The manuscript uses the imagery of the glacier. A glacier is massive, silent, and moves with a crushing, unstoppable weight. It does not network with the streams. It does not seek approval from the valleys. It exists in a state of magnificent isolation. To reach the sovereign shift, you must perform the rite of the high peak. This involves the conscious acceptance of psychic solitude. As your abundance grows, as your occulted network begins to yield its harvest, and your blood memory wakes up, you will find that you can no longer participate in the common grievance. You can no longer join the pawn circle to complain about the economy, the weather, or the unfairness of life. You have moved beyond the economy of complaint. This creates a vibrational chasm. You will sit at tables where the conversation feels like a thin, irritating static. You will look into the eyes of people you once loved and see a distance that cannot be bridged. The shadow side of wealth is the realization that gold is heavy, and heavy things sink to the bottom alone. The transmutation of nostalgia. A deeper mystery within this chapter is the execution of the past. The manuscript insists that nostalgia is a poison for the sovereign. It is the ghost of the pawn, trying to pull the Grandmaster back into the safety of the herd. To maintain your equilibrium, you must be willing to let the you that existed yesterday die without a funeral. The ancients taught that the Grandmaster is a creature of the eternal now. Every friendship that must be left behind, every habit that no longer serves a sovereign frequency, and every environment that feels small must be sacrificed. You do not leave them out of arrogance. You leave them because you have outgrown the oxygen level of that environment. If a shark stays in a goldfish pond, it does not become a better shark. It simply dies of starvation. The sacrifice is the willingness to be the villain who walked away, rather than the hero who stayed and suffocated. The practice, the ritual of the single candle. The forgotten witness provides a discipline for the initiate to fortify themselves against a social draft. The vigil of the peak. In the primal hours, sit in a room with only one candle. This candle represents your sovereign will. The scanning of tethers. Visualize the people and environments in your life. Feel the strings of expectation they have attached to you. The silent cut. Mentally see yourself taking a blade of inner fire and severing the strings of those who require you to be small, to be loved. The breath of the void. Inhale the cold air of your own solitude. Say to the darkness, I am the master of my own peak. I require no witness but the result. The sovereignty of the unmoved peak. There is a terrifying beauty in a person who truly does not care if they are liked. The shadow side of wealth reveals that when you finally pay the sovereign's sacrifice, you gain a power that cannot be bought. Total frame control. Because you no longer need anything from the marketplace of approval. The marketplace has no hook in you. You can walk into any negotiation, any conflict, or any room and be the most powerful person there, simply because you are the most willing to walk away. The Grandmaster's abundance is sovereign because it is not dependent on the permission of the many. It was forged in the void, protected by the sealed lip, and paid for with the blood of the common self. The ancients observed, the pawn wants to be the king of the hill so he can be seen by the valley. The Grandmaster wants to be the mountain so he can touch the stars in silence. One seeks a view, the other seeks the infinite. Visual motif. The single candle on the snowy summit. As you navigate the marketplace this week, hold the image of a single, steady candle burning on a snowy mountain summit. The wind is howling. The temperature is below freezing. The stars are vast and indifferent. The candle does not flicker. It does not seek warmth from other flames. It simply burns with its own internal fuel. Every time you feel the sting of being misunderstood, every time you feel the ache of a fading connection, and every time you feel the coldness of your own ascent, imagine yourself as that candle. You are not lonely. You are singular. You are not exiled. You are elevated. The high price you are paying is the down payment on a kingdom that cannot be shaken. You are trading the warmth of the huddle for the sovereignty of the sun. The ink on the page has turned to a brilliant, freezing white, looking like frost etched into the parchment. The archive feels vast and open, as if the walls have fallen away to reveal a starless, infinite night. You have paid the price. You have climbed the peak. The pawn is dead in the valley. The sovereign is breathing the stars. Chapter 15. The final transmutation. The old texts insist that the alchemist does not turn lead into gold through a change of substance, but through a change of speed. It was observed by the silent ones that the pawn lives in a state of gaseous intention. His dreams are vapor. His words are steam. His actions are a mist that evaporates the moment the sun of reality shines upon them. He is thin. He lacks the molecular density to hold a shape in the physical world. The manuscript calls this the law of the diamond core. In the shadow side of wealth, the final transmutation is the moment the internal sovereignty you have cultivated in the dark becomes so heavy, so pressurized, and so vibrationally dense that it can no longer be contained within the spirit. It must, by the laws of metaphysical physics, collapse into physical matter. To move from pawn to Grandmaster, You must witness the hardening of your shadow into the world's gold, the collapse of the wave. The ancients observed that the universe exists as a sea of possibility until it is witnessed by a sovereign observer. The final transmutation requires you to stop trying and start commanding. The pawn is always in a state of becoming. He is trying to be rich. He is working toward his goals. He is hoping for a shift. This state of trying is a frequency of not having. The Grandmaster, having mastered the void of creation and the sovereign's sacrifice, no longer tries. He has spent so much time in the future reality within his own mind that the current physical world feels like a memory. When your internal certainty becomes more real to you than the walls of your room, the collapse occurs. The gaseous dream becomes the solid fact. This is the moment the bank account reflects the blood memory, the moment the occulted network reveals its hidden fruits, and the moment the world looks at the fool and suddenly sees the king. The alchemy of the ink. The manuscript uses the imagery of the phoenix of ink, unlike the traditional phoenix of fire, which represents a loud, public rebirth. The phoenix of ink represents the rewriting of reality. To perform this transmutation, you must move with the gravity of the absolute. It was noted by the Silent Ones that when a Grandmaster reaches this stage, his actions take on a terrifying efficiency. He no longer wastes energy on marketing, persuasion, or struggle. He simply places his will. Because he has built an inner fire that can melt stone, the world becomes pliable in his hands. He speaks a word, and the silver tethers pull. He makes a move, and the currency of the ancestors flows. He is no longer playing the game. He is writing the rules of the game. He has moved from being a piece on the board to being the hand that moves the board, and, finally, to being the one who owns the room in which the game is played. The mirror of the unseen. A deeper mystery within this chapter is the dissolution of the boundary. The manuscript insists that in the final stage, there is no difference between inside and outside. The Grandmaster realizes that the external world is merely the shadow cast by his internal state. If he wants more wealth, he increases his internal alchemical weight. If he wants more power, he deepens his silence of the stone. The pawn fights the shadow, the world. The Grandmaster moves the object, the self, and the shadow follows automatically. This is the ultimate sovereignty. It is the realization that you are the primary cause. When you reach this state, you possess a quiet abundance that cannot be stolen, because the world didn't give it to you. You exuded it. You grew it from the void like a crystal grows from a saturated solution. The practice, the ceremony of the solidified will, the forgotten witness, provides the final discipline for the initiate to seal their transformation. The integration of the shadows in the primal hours bring to mind all 14 previous laws. Feel the sealed lip, the void, the inner fire, and the sovereign's sacrifice as a single, rotating sphere of energy in your chest. The crystallization. Visualize that sphere shrinking. See it becoming smaller, darker, and more dense, until it is a single, black diamond, the philosopher's stone of your own life. The command of manifestation. Look at a physical object or a specific number in your life that represents your goal. Direct the pressure of that black diamond toward it. Do not wish, simply acknowledge that it is already yours. The final silence. Breathe out the last of your doubt. Walk away from the practice with the boredom of the rich. It is done. The sovereignty of the completed work. There is a specific stillness that follows the final transmutation. The shadow side of wealth reveals that once you have truly become the Grandmaster, you no longer feel the need to win. Winning is for those who fear losing. You have moved into the infinite game. You are now a natural force. The Grandmaster's abundance is silent because it is inherent. It doesn't need to shout. It simply is. You move through the world with an occulted majesty. You treat the pawns with a detached kindness, and you treat other sovereigns with a silent nod of recognition. You are part of the invisible government of the wise. The ancients observed. The pawn chases the gold to the end of the rainbow and finds nothing. The Grandmaster sits in the dark and becomes the gold. The world then chases him. Visual motif. The phoenix of ink. As you navigate the marketplace this final week, hold the image of a phoenix rising from a pool of ink. The phoenix is not made of feathers. It is made of dark, swirling liquid. It is heavy, shimmering, and leaves a mark on everything it touches. It does not fly toward the sun. It flows through the world like a sovereign current. Every time you execute a task, every time you manage your assets, and every time you exercise your authority, see yourself as the ink phoenix. You are inscribing your will onto the fabric of reality. Your movements are permanent. Your words are laws. Your silence is gravity. You are no longer seeking abundance. You are distilling it from the very air you breathe. The ink on the page is now a liquid mirror, reflecting the emerald flame of the dying candle. The archive is pulsing with a rhythmic, subterranean thrum. The work is complete. The transcription is finished. The pawn is a discarded husk. The Grandmaster is standing in the center of the archive, looking out at a world that is finally, perfectly, his own. The closing ceremony, the seal of the archive. The manuscript concludes, not with a signature, but with a final withdrawal. The shadow side of wealth requires that this entire transmission now undergo a mental cremation. You have absorbed the frequency. The words are now useless husks. The ancients observed that the more you refer to the map, the less you experience the terrain. To be a Grandmaster, you must be the law, not study it. The rite of the skeletal hand. Visualize a skeletal hand, the symbol of the ancestral deep stream holding a heavy, silver signet ring. The wax is red, as thick as the currency of the ancestors. The burning of the image, in the theater of your mind. See these 15 scrolls being cast into the inner fire. Watch the ink curl and the parchment turn to gray ash. Feel the relief of no longer having to remember the laws, for they are now written in your marrow. The pressing of the seal. See the skeletal hand press the signet ring into the hot wax at the base of your throat. This is the seal of the sealed lip. It is the physical sensation of your power being locked within your own boiler. The final silence. For the next 3 minutes, sit in absolute stillness. Do not think of wealth. Do not think of sovereignty. Do not think of the Grandmaster. Simply feel the alchemical weight of your own existence. The sovereignty of the forgotten truth. The manuscript warns, he who talks of the archive has already left it. From this moment forward, you are to speak to no one of the law of silent abundance. If you are asked where your shift came from, you are to offer the mask of the fool. Attribute your success to luck, to hard work, or to the marketplace. Let them believe the lies they tell themselves to feel safe. Your true power is now occulted. The shadow wealth you are building is a secret between you and the void. Because it is hidden, it is protected. Because it is silent, it is absolute. Because it is yours, it is infinite. The visual motif, the wax seal. As you step out of this hidden archive and back into the marketplace of men, hold the image of that wax seal at your throat. It is cold. It is hard. It is permanent. Every time the world tries to bait you into an argument, every time the venom of envy strikes, and every time you are tempted to announce your glory, feel the pressure of the seal. Remember, the pawn speaks to be seen. The Grandmaster is the silence that follows the strike. The archive doors are heavy, oak-ribbed with iron, and they are now closing. The sound of the latch is the final word of the manuscript. You entered this room as a seeker. You leave it as a sovereign. Go now into the primal hours. Move with the gravity of the stone. Build your empire in the night, and let the world wonder why, in a room full of noise, you are the only one who is truly, terrifyingly abundant. The archive is closed.